Property Patriot, you are cleared hot.
Hey, today on the Aim High podcast, we sit down with Brian Briscoe. He's a seasoned real estate investor and military veteran. In this episode, Brian shares his journey from the Marine Corps to mastering multifamily real estate investments. My key takeaways for this episode include the importance of aiming high and setting goals, the transformative power of real estate in achieving financial freedom, and the insights into effective property management and strategies. Tune in to gain valuable insight from Brian's experience, where we provide real estate investors with the tools to achieve generational wealth. This is the Aim High Podcast, show number 65. Good day, High Flyers, and welcome to the Aim High Podcast. Today, I am joined by Brian Briscoe. Brian, how are you, man?
Doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Listen, we haven't talked for a little while, but you and I have a lot in common. First, we both retired from the military on the exact
same day.
Same day, right? 2 years ago. Both heavily into real estate.
Yep.
Both podcasters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Listen, I could go all day on, because I'm a fanboy. I hate to say it like that because you and I know each other, but at the same time, dude, the things that you have done, I'm just going to let you go ahead and give a description because I could go on for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And I've been watching what you're doing as well. And we got slightly different ways we're investing in real estate, but it looks like you're crushing it as well. Yeah. As far as me, grew up in the Salt Lake City area, and it took me 25 years to land back in Salt Lake City, but that's where we're investing now. My goal 25 years ago, when I was in college trying to get that job that everybody talks about, my goal was I wanted to teach at the University of Utah. I love Salt Lake. I love the University of Utah. The block U on this beanie right now that's the Utah logo. And one thing everybody told me is you have to have your credentials, your PhD and everything else. You have to have all of that from out of state school, right? Because they hire people from out of state, so they don't have the same. Anyway, lots of good reasons around it. So I went out of state for school. So I bachelor's and master's from the University of Utah. The PhD was the one that mattered. So I started school at the University of Minnesota, and that was August of 2001. Now, at the time, I was a Marine reservist. I was E2. Marines don't give you a lot of rank credit for college, but I was an E2 in the Marines and waiting for that next rank when September 11th happened. When obviously I had a couple degrees, so that gave me some options inside the military. And of course, on September 11th, we're getting the reserve I was with did their phone tree call in, and everybody had to go into the unit and whatnot. And it was scary from one standpoint because we had just moved to Minnesota. We had just started that new part. And now it's basically what we learned from the reserve meeting was you can get called up at any time, as little as 48 hours. Ideally, we're going to get more notice. I started really thinking about how that would work, which amazingly never entered my mind when I joined the reserves. I started thinking about how the mechanics of that would work. And the easiest answer for me was to commission and go active duty. So that was by far the easiest thing to do from my vantage point. It's okay. It was something that I knew. I could commission, I could do 3.5 years. My reserve commitment would be wiped away. And I come back and I do school on my own timeline. So that was the plan. It didn't work out like that. Yeah. At the end of the 3.5 year mark, I wanted to get out, but there was one job that I decided, hey, if I get this job, I'll stay in the Marine Corps. And that job was being a college professor. I was working at the ROTC, and I put my finger on that one job and I said, if I get this job, I'll stay in the Marine Corps. And guess what? They gave me the job I wanted. And it was like, okay, cool. So I ended up working at San Diego State University for 3 years. It was a fun time. It was a really good job working with 18 to 22-year-old kids. But that's where I started investing in real estate. I had a little extra time on my hands. It's something I always wanted to do. And that's where I started buying single family houses. The first one was in Salt Lake. The second one was in San Diego. And then I went back to the fleet, the deployable units, and spent 2 of the next 3 years deployed, and then ended up getting an overseas assignment, which took me, they're pretty dang good excuses. Spending a year in Iraq or a year in Afghanistan and not buying property seems like a pretty good excuse, but I wish I would have figured out a way back then. But long story short, there's about an 8-year period where I put real estate investing on hold. And then around 2017, I'm like, okay, I've got 3-4 years left and I really love real estate. I want to do more in real estate. And so that's when I really started doubling down, got into a coaching program, co-founded a company, and ended up starting to buy apartments. So that's what kind of got me my start where I am right now. And so fast forward from 2018 when I signed up for coaching to now, I've closed on ballpark 1,600 units. Most of them were syndications. There have been two properties that weren't actual syndications. And do your listeners, do you think they understand those terms, syndications and the joint venture?
Yeah, absolutely. We do talk about it. We're primarily intermediate investors. So,
okay.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind though, just give us a quick rundown on what a syndication deal is versus a JV.
A JV, you have a couple of people, and the number of people isn't so important, but everybody has a role essentially. And lots of different people are going to give you different definitions. So hopefully mine jives with everyone else's. Essentially with a JV, everybody puts forth either money or sweat equity to get the job across the line, and nobody's passive. When you start doing syndications, now you have the general partners and limited partners, where you have true passive investors that are just contributing funds and not doing anything else. So with the syndications, obviously you have investors that you're trying to keep your investors. You're trying to hit your return metrics and everything else. Not that you're not with the JVs. I think there's a little bit more emphasis on hitting those metrics when you have a syndication, because you want those investors to invest with you again. So out of all the units that I've done now, I think most people should realize this, but I'll still say it out loud, is even though I have ownership, that's a better way to say it. I have ownership in 1,600 units. That could be anywhere from a very small sliver to quite a sizable sliver. So out of those 1,600 units, there's one property that I have 0.5% in, and there are other properties that I have up to 20% in. When we start looking at those numbers, I've got everything in between and played a bunch of different roles. But so focus right now is Salt Lake City. Like I said, we did come full circle. I retired 2 years ago, and 6 months ago founded another company that would focus in Salt Lake City. We have our first acquisition under our belt, and we're just trying to get that second one under contract. And that's where we're at right now, and looking for B-class properties in Salt Lake and trying to get the team built up and running is where we're at.
Now, this is the second iteration of you jumping into multifamily properties. And
yep.
I think you're doing yourself a service. I know we're talking about the number, but you've over 1,000 as a general partner, and over 100 million, 100 and more.
150 right now is where we're at.
Yeah. In manageable assets. So it's quite impressive. When you say a small sliver, I would take a small sliver of that.
Yeah. And a lot of times I have this argument with myself. What's better, a small sliver of a large apartment complex or a large sliver of a smaller one? When there's pros and cons to both sides. But yeah, so I think this is probably iteration number 3. Iteration number 1 was the Four Oaks years. Spent 3 years with the same partners with a company called Four Oaks. Two of the 4 founders left that company about a year and a half ago. Just a lot of things we didn't agree on it on the inside, and it seems that it was always 2-2 on every vote. And finally, the other one said, "Hey, I'm done. I'm out." And when he said he was out, I said, "I'm out too." So that was iteration 1. We did 600 units together, all in South Carolina and Georgia. And part of that, I guess, breaking up the band, it made the management of the properties a little bit awkward. And as much as people say that, hey, we're still friends and whatnot, yeah, I don't know about that with this case. I think
I'm going to tell you that I'm still a little sore over the 22 unit by Fort Gordon.
Yeah.
You guys got that one on me.
Yeah. So there were a couple that if I would have known we were competing, that would have been a different deal. But so that's been a decent one. Our occupancy right now is high 80s right now, so it's not as great as it could be going, but it's going okay. So I think number 1 was the Four Oaks years. I think later on I'll call phase 2 the in-between years. It's Brian trying to do things by himself. And I ended up being pretty creative. I'd raised capital for a couple of deals, but where I got the biggest chunks and the easiest chunks of general partnership was signing on loans and coming in with newer investors, signing on the loans and walking away with 3 to 5% total ownership, not 3 to 5% of the GP, but 3 to 5% ownership for signing on people's loans. And there is some risk involved with that. In the last year, closed on 8 properties. Most of them were ballpark 20 to 60 units. So we're talking smaller properties, but that's about what my balance sheet can handle. But I come in as helping newer teams qualify for those loans, those $2, $3, $4 million loans, agency loans and whatnot. And so ended up doing that quite a bit over the last 18 months, occasionally raising capital for some of these groups. And then stage 3 was streamline capital in the Salt Lake City focus. I'm going to be extremely selective at partnering with other people on deals right now to focus on building what we have in the Salt Lake area.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, do you need help running your business? I don't know what I would do without my executive assistant. Get outsourced solutions for every need by visiting Reba Global. Check them out now and get help for just about every aspect of your business today. From marketing through property management and even administrative virtual assistants. Check out Reba Global. The link is in the show notes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in addition to that, the podcast, I know we were talking about it offline, Diary of an Apartment Investor. I've been following that for a couple of years. In fact, you had me on as a guest a while back with Brandon Turner. That was an awesome introduction.
Yes.
Definitely at the top of my list, by the way, on podcasts that I've done.
Yeah. And I remember when he scheduled, I thought, man, I got to find somebody that I can really share this with that I really like. And I started looking at who's around. I'm like, you know what? Bud would be a really good person for this one. So thanks for coming on to that one and sharing that stage with me.
Yeah. Oh, that was my pleasure, man. It was absolutely my pleasure. And then from that, you moved into the Tribe of Titans.
Yep. Yeah.
Not just a networking group, though.
No, so the Tribe of Titans was something that when I left Four Oaks, I took with me. It had been my baby. It was something that I had really put a lot of time and effort into. And when you look at who out of the group had really put that together, it was like 95% me. So when I left, I negotiated pretty low price for what it's worth as far as getting, leaving with the Tribe of Titans intact. But it was originally designed to go into mentorship. I started compiling content, writing lessons, and when we launched it, we relied on content heavy on networking, and I had a lot of people in there, and it was more of a community than it was content. I think over the last year, I think that pendulum shifted where now we got a lot more content than community. And yeah, back in March, I finally launched the coaching program. I think had I stayed with Four Oaks, I would have launched it a lot earlier. But, so yeah, March, we launched that. I've got about 20 coaching clients right now. I do like to keep it small. I like to keep my hands on and keep it personal. But yeah, so that's where the Tribe of Titans is now. We still have people who you can come in at a fairly low subscription and learn, and there still is that community aspect to it. But we've introduced some higher ticket items as well. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. And I would say it's probably not probably, the Diary of Apartment Investor podcast, the avatar for that are the newer aspiring investors, I call them. Mm-hmm. And that was designed to be a feeder into the Tribe of Titans. So that's why our podcast has its unique format, which I am doing away with, the aspiring and experienced guest on each show. But that's why we had that format up front and what it was designed to do. And it's worked pretty well. Just, it's time. It's time to redo it.
Yeah, now, no man is an island. So what does your team look like now in your current state?
Yeah, right now I've got two full-time employees on the Streamline side and one full-time employee on the Tribe of Titans side. So there's really good things about that, and there's really bad things about that. When I was with Four Oaks, nobody received a salary. We were all just getting distributions when acquisition fees. And when we got chunks of money, we're just doing distributions. A couple of 5-figure, sometimes low 6-figure distributions spread throughout a year. But the downside to the partnership is there were 4 equal partners. So everything we purchased, whatever the Four Oaks general partnership percentage was, I would get 25% of that. And I was typically walking away with 15 to 20% of the general partnership through Four Oaks. So my shares in Four Oaks, the way it worked is Four Oaks was the general partner, and I had shares in Four Oaks. But when you did all the pass-through math, 15 to 20% of the general partnership is essentially what I owned. And when I left the company, that's how we worked the compensation, is we just converted my shares in Four Oaks to GP shares in the properties. And so, so the pro is you've got 4 different guys all running towards the same objective, and you can do more. The cons are you split everything 4 ways. Right now, hiring people, it's much different. Now I've got this payroll burden. So, 3 guys, 2 of them are, just into the 6-figure mark. One of them is high 5s. And so when you look at the end of the year, I've got almost a $300,000 payroll. So that's one of the downsides to it. But the upside is, when we close on a deal, I don't dilute my shares. So it's definitely a money now versus money later. I'm paying a lot more money now so I'm buying partners essentially. We just closed on a property in Salt Lake, and I think my total ownership in the property is close to 20% because I own 70% of the GP shares. And I also have money invested. Now when we're buying properties, I'm walking away with big chunks instead of small slices. So It is very much a money now versus money later. And where we're at is control is also important. I sometimes disagree with myself, but when you have 4 equal partners, getting everybody on the same page is difficult. Getting myself on the same page with myself is sometimes difficult. But yeah, those are the pros and cons to the different models. And fortunately, we had enough exits, and I had enough cash sitting in the bank a year ago where I thought it was a good idea to launch and hire people just for the benefits. And obviously, I just got to make sure that there's enough money hitting the bank account every month to pay everybody. And that's some months it's stressful, but what a lot of syndicators realize when they get into this role, and this is different from like the JV deals or different from going with smaller properties. There's not a lot of cash flow for syndicators, but there are big checks in the form of acquisition fees and the dispositions and everything else. Is as a syndicator, you have to always be closing. If you're buying the smaller apartments or the smaller or the duplexes and the quads and whatnot, you can really stack your cash flow a lot easier, but ends up being a little more difficult. As a syndicator, it's just a different type of compensation.
Yeah, I'm tracking that. We just had a fire inspection at my 6 unit that I'm walking on now.
Yeah.
We're 4/6 of the way. So we're right there, man. We're 2/3 occupied. So
yeah,
it's a lot better than half. Which
it is.
When you're talking about 100 doors, that's a completely different monster.
Yeah.
What I know we always talk about successes, but let's talk about learning experiences or one of the failures that you may have had during this entire process. What was the one thing that sticks out in your mind?
The one that's most the one that's most heavily on my mind right now, because I got the monthly text, is one of the JVs that we did. It was the second property that we closed on. The first property was 2 together, so third property that we closed on. And it was a Section 8 play. When we went in, we looked at it, and it's 33 units in Columbia, South Carolina. We got a ridiculously low price on it. So it was, I think we paid we paid exactly $23,000 a door. That's what our offer price was, 23 times 33. So I think it was like $876 or $879 or something like that. But we ended up paying around just under $900,000 for it, which is a ridiculous price for 33 units in Columbia, even in 2019 when we bought it. But it is a project-based housing. And what we underestimated is how difficult it would be working with the housing authority.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 different value-add plays going at the same time. Value-add play number 1 was let's fix up the units, make it look nicer, because it was really in bad shape. And the second value-add play was moving from one Section 8 program to another Section 8 program. And when we looked at the numbers, we put a lot of trust and confidence in the housing authority. They're telling us, hey, here's your best bet. Here's what we would suggest you do. And long story short, when we converted from one program to another, we would essentially double our rents. And so we were thinking, okay, we will fix the place up. We'll make it nicer, and we'll be able to attract more people, because the Section 8 tenants still have a choice where they live.
Yeah.
So we had to make it appealing for them. And the second part of it would be working on this conversion. RAD conversion is what it's called. They were telling us it was going to take 6 months to go from the program we were on to RAD, and it took 4 years. We just got approved for it last month. Now, when you go back and look at it, we could have canceled the Section 8 contract. it's a 12-month process, but they advertised, hey, 6 months, you're on rad. And one of the nuances to the Section 8, to the program this was on, is you can only cancel the contract on the anniversary of the contract, right?
Okay.
And so when we bought the property, we had just passed the contract anniversary. And we were looking at this thinking 6 months to go from where we're at to rad and doubling our rents versus almost 2 years to get off of Section 8. I'm like, we'll keep it on Section 8. But yeah, it ended up being a huge learning experience. The text that I refer to is the cough up some money text that I get once a month from one of the partners on that deal. And it's the pay the mortgage text is what that is. So, but that text has some good news embedded into it. It's now that we are on the new program, this should be the last time that we're coughing up money. So anyway, that's been a learning experience. And I think end of the day, there were a lot of things that we could not control that we were assuming away. It's one of those things where we assumed that the housing authority would move faster. So things that,
God forbid, government would actually do things in a fast.
I know. Right. And when I bought that, I was working at the Pentagon. I should have known better. Center of bureaucracy. But yeah, the big learning thing there was we got to make sure we're keeping things inside of our managing risk is a better way to say it. The things that I can directly control are less risky than the things that I can't directly control. And in this case, we assumed a whole lot of risk on something that we couldn't directly control. And as a result, I've been sending wiring $2,000 once a month to make sure that mortgage gets paid, which is not fun.
Yeah.
So
I hear you.
Yeah.
Capital calls are brutal.
Yeah. And that's been an ongoing monthly thing. And there's 5 of us in the deal, and it's around a $10,000 shortfall every month. But now that we're on the new program, our rents went from, I think, like $650 to they almost doubled. It ended up being a little bit shy of a 2x. But yeah, so our revenue doubled, and now when we put it on the market to sell it, I think we're going to be able to get a much higher price because we have demonstrated rent instead of potential. Hey, here's the potential, which is what we bought it on. And it was hard to realize that potential.
Great. All right, Brian, before we go into our soaring 4, I ask everybody this question. So what is one thing that you can take away, one thing that you learned as your wealth increased?
Good question. I think right now liquidity is a big thing. It's just managing things like liquidity. Earlier in the year, I was flush with cash, which is a good problem to have. But I think that there were a couple of times where liquidity ended up being extremely low. I ended up with some of these deals that I came in as key principal on. I ended up putting money towards the deals, number one, like investing in the deals myself, and I ended up putting risk capital out. Some of the deals haven't fully funded yet, and so I haven't got risk capital back, and we're putting EMD out on new properties and then payroll and everything else. Managing liquidity and making sure that you always have some liquidity was something that I didn't anticipate being a problem. And so it was something that I took my eye off that ball. And there was a point a couple months ago where I was scratching my head thinking, oh, okay, I got payroll to make. How am I going to do this? But fortunately, the tribe of Titans is actually putting out enough income right now that it's almost supporting payroll and everything else. Yeah, managing liquidity has been the biggest challenge for me this year, and making sure that I'm not overcommitted with my dollars in my personal bank account.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Brian, we're going to go into the soaring four. These are the same 4 questions that I ask every guest that can help someone who is just starting out achieve new heights.
Yep.
So question number 1 is, what do you use to keep yourself motivated?
That's morphed over the time. At first, it was that retirement date, and that was a huge motivation. Burning the bridges is what my idea was. Right now, I sat down and it's the end of the year. I don't know when this is going to air, but it's 3 days from the end of the year. But that's something that's really heavily on my mind, because I realize that when I attach a why to my goals, I achieve them. When I don't attach a why to my goals, I don't. So what motivates me? Spending good quality time with my family. And when you look at it, you can be a pauper and still spend really good quality time with your family. But when I start looking at the type of time and type of things I want to do with my family, it takes money. So right now, what I'm really doing is trying to find that balance where I can, keep that carrot in front of me and always keep working towards it.
What is one thing that you learned that completely changed your mindset?
Oh, geez. Lots of these. I think one thing that I realized, and this was attached to what I just mentioned, the retirement. For 3 years straight, during my morning routine, I would look at my goals.
Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Apologies. She's
All
feisty
right.
today for some reason.
No worries. Do you want to ask the question again? Or
Yeah. Let's do that. Okay. What is one thing that you learned that completely changed your mindset?
Going along that goal thing and the military retirement thing is, I've learned to aim high, because I realized a couple of years ago that for 3 years, from like 2018, 2017 to 2021, the biggest goal I had was replacing my active duty income. And that was my goal. And I would tell that to myself every day. I had it written down, and it was my morning routine. Part of that was I will replace my annual income by October 31st, 2021. Right. And then there was a lot more to it there. Like all the hows were in there. The hows and the whys were built into there. But when I looked at where I ended up, I almost within $10,000 replaced my active duty income. And what I've learned since then is to aim higher, because if you aim too low and hit your goals, that's great. You hit your goals, but I think I'd rather aim higher, fall short, and achieve more. So that's really one thing that has changed a lot recently.
And fitting. That's why the podcast is called the Aim High Podcast.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not only an Air Force thing, but it's also where to set your goals.
Yeah, it is. It is very fitting.
Yeah. What tools do you use to keep yourself on track?
We have, as a company, we've adopted the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, and if I load it in there as a to-do, it gets done. If I don't load it in there as a to-do, it's not going to get done. Not going to get done, but it's less likely to get done. So that's one tool that has really helped.
Great. Very familiar with it. We use it. So it's a great program.
It is. It is.
And then what is one thing you would change if you started all over?
I think I would have aimed higher. Going into that Four Oaks partnership, I had reservations and I pushed them aside, but it worked for the time, but it wasn't really what I wanted long term. It was a calculated risk. And I think starting over, I think I would have paid more attention to the risk versus reward situation on everything. What's the reward I'm getting out of it? Is it worth the risk? And when the risk and reward gets out of balance, that's when you need to make changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably what it would have been. I'm not saying I wouldn't have co-founded Four Oaks. I think that risk versus reward thing flip-flopped several months, maybe even a full year before I decided to move on. But yeah, That's what I would change, is be a little bit more aware of how things were going to affect me long term and make plans to figure things out a little better.
Great. Brian, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where would they do that?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to do it. Very active on LinkedIn, except for the week between Christmas and New Year's. That's traditionally the week that I don't post at all. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place. And if you're not connected with me, reach out and connect. And I do send messages to everybody that connects with me, trying to see if there's any collaboration there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Brian, thank you very much. I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate your time too.
All right. Thanks for being a part of the Aim High community. Your support drives us to create valuable content, and we can't wait to see your success stories in real estate investing. Till next time, aim high, never stop learning. Bud Evans, signing off. We'll see you soon.